A millionaire widower followed his nanny after work. What he discovered changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The night was crisp, the city skyline gleaming in the distance as Michael Carter walked through the doors of his luxurious penthouse. His hands, still cold from the night air, tightened around the keys in his pocket. As a successful businessman and widower, Michael had long ago lost the joy of life. His wife, Laura, had passed away 2 years ago, and ever since, he found himself consumed by work, with no room for happiness or connection. The loss of Laura left a void that no amount of money or luxury could fill. His life was empty, every day a cycle of meetings, calls, and business deals. The only light in his life was his daughter, Lily, but even then, he felt disconnected. His housekeeper, Rebecca, had been helping with Lily for months now, a woman who seemed to have a gentle, caring nature. But Michael had never really paid much attention to her, thinking of her merely as an employee. However, tonight something felt different. He had just returned from a late meeting and noticed Rebecca was still working in the house. He knew she had already put Lily to bed, but something in him wanted to see if she was still around. It wasn't like him to wonder about his employees, but curiosity tugged at him. He grabbed his coat, slipped on his shoes, and headed out the door. As he walked down the quiet street, he noticed her Rebecca, hurrying down the road, her coat wrapped tightly around her body. He paused, watching her from a distance. It was strange. She didn't seem like someone who would be out at this hour, especially after a long day. Michael felt an odd tug of concern and made the decision to follow her. As he trailed behind her, his mind raced. Why was she out here at night? Where was she going? Michael had always prided himself on being a man who knew what was happening around him. But in that moment, he realized how little he truly knew about Rebecca. He followed her through a few more streets, his thoughts swirling. She seemed to have a purpose, walking with determination, never looking back. After a few blocks, she stopped outside a small cafe. Michael watched as she entered, disappearing through the door. He stood there for a moment, debating whether to follow her inside or turn back. Something about this felt off. But his curiosity got the better of him. He walked up to the cafe, peering through the window. Inside, Rebecca was talking to a man someone Michael didn't recognize. They were laughing, sharing a cup of coffee. Michael couldn't hear their conversation, but the sight stirred something inside him. He felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of confusion and jealousy. Why was she here, with someone else? He had always seen Rebecca as just the nanny, someone who cared for his daughter. But in that moment, he realized that maybe he had been wrong. Maybe she wasn't just an employee. Maybe she had a life outside of the home, one that he had never bothered to understand. The door to the cafe opened, and Rebecca stepped out, her face lighting up as she said goodbye to the man. Michael quickly turned and walked away, his mind in turmoil. What had he just witnessed? As he made his way back home, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about Rebecca was wrong. His feelings were mixed, surprised, confused, and strangely, a little hurt. He had been living his life with a wall up, not realizing that someone who had been in his home every day had a world of her own. Little did he know, this moment would change everything between them. The next day, things felt different. Michael couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca. Was she hiding something, or had he just misjudged her? He didn't know. But one thing was clear, something had shifted. His perspective on her, and maybe even on his own life, would never be the same again. I apologize for the confusion, but after the events of last night, Michael couldn't get Rebecca out of his mind. The image of her laughing with another man at the cafe stayed with him long after he returned home. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't that he was jealous, it was more than that. For the first time in months, he felt something other than numbness. The curiosity that had been sparked the night before grew stronger. He knew something was different about Rebecca, but what? Why had he never taken the time to really know her? He had hired her to take care of Lily, but that was it. She was simply another part of his life, a cog in the machine. Yet, now, she seemed so much more. Michael tried to focus on work the next morning, but it was no use. His mind kept drifting back to Rebecca. He glanced at his watch and sighed. It was almost lunchtime, and as if on cue, his office phone rang. "Mr. Carter, there's a problem with the quarterly report," his assistant, Claire, said. Michael barely registered the words. "Handle it," he replied shortly, his voice distant. "I'll be in a meeting." With that, he hung up. As he stared out the window, his thoughts returned to Rebecca. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to understand her more. But how? He didn't know anything about her life outside of the house, and the thought unsettled him. Rebecca had been with him for months, and yet she was practically a stranger. His fingers drummed anxiously on the edge of his desk. What if she was hiding something? What if she didn't want to get close to him? It wasn't like he was a stranger to loneliness. After Laura's death, he'd shut himself off from the world, focusing solely on work and Lily. He had promised himself he wouldn't let anyone get close again, especially not someone like Rebecca. But something in him was telling him to take a chance. That afternoon, after Lily had finished her afternoon activities, Michael decided to follow his instincts. He walked through the halls of his penthouse, pausing at the door to the living room, where Rebecca was sitting, reading a book. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, but Michael noticed how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a polite smile, the kind you give to your employer when you don't really want to be there. "Rebecca, can I speak to you for a moment?" Michael asked, his voice more tentative than he intended. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Is something wrong?" She looked concerned, but Michael could see the wariness in her gaze. He had never really asked her anything personal, always keeping their conversations strictly professional. "No, nothing's wrong," he replied, though he wasn't sure that was true. "I was just wondering if you'd like to join me for lunch. We've never really talked outside of the house. I thought it might be nice." Rebecca hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm not sure if that's a good idea, sir," she said carefully. Michael could tell she was trying to be respectful but was also nervous. "Why not?" he asked, stepping closer. "You've been here for months. You know Lily, and you know me. I think it's time we had a real conversation." She bit her lip, glancing down for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "I don't think it's appropriate, Mr. Carter," she said softly. Michael paused, his chest tightening. He had expected this, but the words still stung. "Why do you say that?" he asked, the vulnerability in his voice surprising both of them. "You're my employer and I'm your employee," Rebecca said, her voice steady. It's not that I don't appreciate your offer. I just don't think it would be right." Michael felt a flash of frustration. He had never been good at reading people, and Rebecca was no exception. "What do you mean by not right? I'm not some cold businessman, you know. I'm just a man trying to figure things out." His words hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotions. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, and Michael could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, but she held back. Finally, she sighed and stood up. "I don't want to make things awkward, Mr. Carter. I just think it's best if we keep our relationship professional." Michael stood still for a moment, the weight of her words settling on him. He had been expecting something like this, but it still stung. "I understand," he said softly, his tone dropping. Rebecca gave him a small, polite smile before turning to walk away. As she left the room, Michael stood there, staring after her, the emptiness in his chest growing. He had expected this to be an easy conversation, but it had only left him with more questions. Was she rejecting him as a person, or was there something more going on? As he watched her leave, Michael realized he was more than just curious now. He was determined to figure out what was really going on with Rebecca. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew he had to find out. "I apologize for the confusion, but after the conversation with Rebecca, Michael felt an unfamiliar sense of frustration and curiosity. He couldn't get the conversation out of his head. Her refusal was polite, but something about it didn't sit right with him. She had been kind, professional, yet distant. He could tell there was more to her than she was letting on. And the fact that she was trying so hard to keep things professional made him wonder if there was a deeper reason. The following day, Michael couldn't focus on anything. His mind was consumed with questions about Rebecca. Who was she, really? Why had she been so secretive? His life had always been predictable, controlled. But Rebecca had thrown him off balance in a way that no one ever had before. The thought of her hiding something made his stomach twist, but he also felt a strange pull toward her. He wanted to know more, to understand her. He decided to follow her again. After all, if she wasn't going to open up to him voluntarily, maybe he could find some answers himself. He left his office early that afternoon, telling Claire he had an urgent meeting to attend, which was partly true. As he got into his car, he felt a mix of excitement and guilt. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he knew he couldn't just sit back and let this mystery go unsolved. He drove through the city, the familiar streets blurring as his thoughts raced. He remembered the night before, when Rebecca had walked away so quickly, and how she had avoided his invitation to lunch. He felt a pang of disappointment, but also a sense of responsibility. He needed to understand what was going on, not just for his own peace of mind, but also for Lily's sake. Rebecca was an important part of their lives, and if something was going on with her, it could affect everything. Michael parked his car a few blocks away from the house, just out of sight, and waited. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, so he stayed low, watching the front door. After what felt like an eternity, Rebecca finally appeared, walking down the front steps of the house. She was carrying a large tote bag, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She didn't seem to notice Michael's car, and for a moment, he just watched her. She seemed so ordinary, so real. But he knew there had to be more beneath the surface. Rebecca had always been professional, calm, and collected around him. But now, seeing her out of her usual environment, he wondered who she really was. She walked briskly down the street, heading in the same direction as the day before. Michael followed her from a distance, careful not to get too close. His heart was pounding as he turned the corner, keeping her in sight. She stopped at a small bookstore, looking through the window for a moment before entering. Michael stopped across the street, watching her through the glass. He felt like a voyeur, but his curiosity was overpowering. He waited a few minutes before deciding to follow her inside. The bookstore was quiet, the faint scent of paper and ink filling the air. He walked past rows of books, trying not to make his presence known. When he turned the corner, he spotted Rebecca in the back of the store, browsing through a shelf of old novels. She was smiling softly, lost in the books, and Michael couldn't help but feel a little guilty for intruding on her privacy. But the pull to know more was too strong. He approached her slowly, trying to be discreet. "Rebecca," he said softly, and she turned around, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Michael's heart was racing, and Rebecca's face seemed to freeze in place, as if she wasn't sure how to react. She recovered quickly, though, offering a small, awkward smile. "Mr. Carter," she said, clearly flustered. "I didn't expect to see you here." Michael felt his pulse quicken as he tried to find the right words. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but he also couldn't ignore the situation. "I was just passing by," he said, his voice sounding more strained than he intended. "I didn't mean to intrude, but I wanted to talk." "About yesterday." Rebecca's expression faltered, and she took a step back. "Mr. Carter, this really isn't the time or place," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I told you yesterday. I think it's better if we keep our relationship professional." Michael could feel his frustration building. This wasn't what he had expected. He had hoped that seeing her in a more personal setting would break the ice. But now, it felt like he had made a mistake. He didn't know what to do next. He had always been the one in control. But in this moment, he felt completely out of his depth. "I understand," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "But there's something about you, Rebecca. Something I can't shake. I need to know what's going on." Rebecca's eyes softened, and for the briefest moment, Michael thought he saw a flicker of something vulnerable in her expression, but it was gone in an instant. She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "You don't understand, Mr. Carter. You don't know anything about me." She turned away, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm not who you think I am." Michael's heart skipped a beat, and he took a step forward, reaching out to her. "Rebecca, please." But before he could say anything more, she had already walked away, disappearing into the maze of bookshelves. Michael stood there for a moment, stunned, his mind racing. What did she mean? What was she hiding? He knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. "I apologize for the confusion. But after Rebecca walked away from him in the bookstore, Michael stood there frozen, his heart racing, and his mind spinning with questions. What had she meant when she said, "I'm not who you think I am"? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to her than he had ever realized. He had followed her, pried into her life, and now she was retreating even further, shutting him out more than ever. His curiosity was gnawing at him, but his frustration was growing as well. The more he tried to understand, the more she seemed to pull away. He had to get answers. He had to know what she was hiding. That evening, as Michael returned home, he found himself pacing around his penthouse, unable to calm his racing thoughts. Lily was in bed, sound asleep, her peaceful face offering a temporary distraction from the storm in his mind. He sat down at the desk, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but all he could think about was Rebecca. What was she hiding? Why was she so insistent on keeping their relationship strictly professional? He couldn't help but feel that he had crossed a line, but he also knew deep down that there was something important about Rebecca that he couldn't ignore. He couldn't just let this go. The next day, he made a decision. He couldn't let her keep shutting him out. He had to talk to her, but this time, he would approach it differently. He would be patient, gentle, and let her come to him in her own time. But Michael's resolve was tested when, later that afternoon, he received a call from his assistant Claire, notifying him that Rebecca had taken the day off. It was unlike her to take time off without notice, and immediately, a sense of unease settled over him. Why would she take the day off now, especially after everything that had happened? Was she avoiding him, or was there something else going on? The worry gnawed at him. He couldn't just sit and wait for answers anymore. He had to go to her. That evening, Michael decided to drive to her apartment. He didn't know exactly where she lived, but he had a vague idea from the few times they had spoken about her personal life. He couldn't wait any longer. He needed to understand what was going on. He drove through the city, the streets growing darker as the sun dipped behind the skyline. He found himself on the outskirts of the city, in a quiet, residential neighborhood. As he pulled up to a small, unassuming building, Michael's heart began to pound. This was it. He parked the car and hesitated for a moment before getting out. He had no plan, no idea what he was going to say, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. Rebecca wasn't just a nanny to him anymore. She was someone who had captivated his attention, someone who had made him question everything. As he walked up to the door, Michael's mind raced, each step feeling heavier than the last. He knocked gently, his heart in his throat. A few moments passed, and then the door creaked open. Rebecca stood there, her eyes wide with surprise when she saw him. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, her voice filled with hesitation. "What are you doing here?" Michael took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I needed to talk to you," he said quietly. "I know you've been avoiding me, but I can't just let this go. I need to understand what's going on, Rebecca." She stepped back, clearly uncomfortable, and Michael could see the conflict in her eyes. "I don't think this is a good idea," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Michael's chest tightened, but he wasn't going to back down this time. "I understand you're scared," he said gently, "but I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to know what's going on. You've been working for me for months, and I don't know anything about you. I don't know why you're so distant. Please, just talk to me." Rebecca stood there for a long moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty, and then, slowly, she stepped aside, allowing him into her apartment. It was a small, cozy space, nothing like the luxury of his penthouse. There were books stacked in corners, pictures on the walls, and an old sofa that looked well-worn. It was clear that Rebecca had lived here for a while, but it was also a place that seemed very much hers. As Michael stepped inside, he felt like he was intruding, but he had come this far, and he wasn't going to turn back now. "Sit down," Rebecca said softly, gesturing toward the couch. Michael did, and for a moment, there was only silence between them. He could feel the tension in the room, but he knew that this was the moment when everything could change. "Rebecca," he began, his voice softer now, "I don't understand. You've been so kind to Lily, and you've been so professional with me. But there's something you're not telling me. And I need to know what it is. I can't keep living like this, wondering what's going on with you. You're important to me, to us." Rebecca looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand," she said again, her voice cracking. "I'm not who you think I am. I never was." Michael leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do you mean?" he asked urgently. "What are you hiding from me?" Rebecca hesitated for a moment, then finally met his gaze. "I'm not just a nanny, Mr. Carter. I have a life, a past that I've been running from. I didn't want you to know, but it's time you did. It's time I told you the truth." Michael's breath caught in his throat. What was she about to say? "I apologize for the confusion," but as Rebecca sat down across from Michael on the worn couch, she took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. The room was quiet, save for the sound of her shallow breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside. Michael's heart was pounding in his chest as he waited, unsure of what to expect, but he knew this was the moment that would define everything between them. He had followed her here, pushed for answers, and now she was about to reveal something that could change his entire perception of her, and perhaps even of himself. "I'm listening, Rebecca," he said softly, his voice steady but laced with concern. "Please, tell me what's going on." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sleeve. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and Michael thought she might back out. But then, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not who you think I am," she repeated, looking up at him with eyes filled with fear and vulnerability. "I'm not just a nanny. I have a past, a life that I've been hiding from everyone, including you." Michael leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice softer now, his curiosity overwhelming his anxiety. Rebecca looked down at her hands, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I wasn't always just a caretaker," she began, her words coming in slow, measured tones. "Before I came to work for you, I was involved in something complicated, something I never wanted to talk about. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want it to affect my work, and I certainly didn't want Lily to get caught up in it." Michael's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. She wasn't just a nanny? What did that mean? "What do you mean complicated?" he asked, his voice filled with concern, but also with a hint of confusion. "You don't have to explain everything, but I need to understand." Rebecca hesitated again, and Michael could see the internal struggle in her eyes. She had clearly been holding this in for a long time, and now she was finally ready to share her truth. "I was involved in a relationship with someone who wasn't exactly who he seemed to be," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He promised me everything: money, security, a future. But in the end, he was using me, and when I found out the truth, it was too late. I tried to leave, but it wasn't that simple. He had a hold on me, on my life, and I couldn't escape until everything fell apart. I had to disappear, start fresh. That's when I came here." Michael's heart sank as he listened to her story. He had never imagined that Rebecca's life could be so complicated, so full of pain and deception. He could see the raw emotion in her eyes, the fear that she had carried with her all this time, the weight of secrets she had kept buried. "So, you came here to escape?" he asked softly, his voice filled with sympathy. Rebecca nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I thought that if I kept my head down, worked hard, stayed quiet, I could build a new life. But then I met you, and things got complicated again. I started to care about Lily, about you, and I couldn't afford to let anyone get too close. I couldn't let my past follow me here. I didn't want you to know who I really was, what I had been through. I didn't want to drag you into my mess." Michael was silent for a moment, processing everything she had just revealed. His heart ached for her. He had always thought of Rebecca as just a hard-working woman, a kind person who had come into their lives and helped take care of Lily. But now, he saw her in a completely different light. She wasn't just a nanny. She was someone who had been through unimaginable struggles and had fought to rebuild her life from nothing. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for her, even though she had kept all of this from him. "Rebecca, I'm sorry," Michael said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea. I never should have pushed you like I did. I see now that you were just trying to protect yourself, and I respect that. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are. I'm not here to judge you. I just want to help if I can." Rebecca's eyes widened, and for the first time she smiled, though it was a small, fragile smile. "You don't have to help," she said quietly. "I've learned to take care of myself." Michael shook his head gently. "I don't believe that. No one should have to carry all that weight alone. You don't have to do this by yourself anymore. You've already done so much. You've helped me, helped Lily, and now, it's my turn to help you." Rebecca looked at him, uncertainty still clouding her expression. But for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I don't know if I can accept help," she whispered. But her voice held a note of vulnerability that made Michael's heart ache. "I've been on my own for so long." Michael reached out gently, placing a hand on hers. "You don't have to do this alone anymore, Rebecca. You have people who care about you, people who want to help. Let us be those people." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Slowly, Rebecca nodded, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Michael didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same again. "I apologize for the confusion," but as Michael sat there, his hand gently resting on Rebecca's, he could feel the weight of her past, the burden she had carried alone for so long. She wasn't just a nanny. She was a woman who had fought to survive, to rebuild, and now, she was letting him in. Michael couldn't remember the last time he had felt so connected to someone, so deeply moved by their vulnerability. He wanted to protect her, to make sure she knew she was no longer alone. "You don't have to carry this weight alone anymore, Rebecca," Michael said softly, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "You've already done so much on your own, but now, it's time to let someone else help you. You don't need to hide anymore." Rebecca didn't speak right away. She simply looked down at their joined hands, her fingers trembling slightly. Michael could see the emotions swirling in her eyes, a mix of doubt, fear, and perhaps just a hint of hope. After a long pause, she finally met his gaze. "I've never let anyone in like this," she whispered. "I've been running for so long, Michael. I'm afraid if I stop, if I let someone close, I'll lose everything again." Michael's heart ached for her, and he gently squeezed her hand. "You won't lose anything, Rebecca. I promise. You don't have to be afraid anymore. You're safe here." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions. Michael didn't know how to make her believe him, but he was determined to show her, every day, that she could trust him, that she could trust herself. "I don't know how to start over," Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I've spent so much time running from my past. I don't know how to move forward." Michael leaned in slightly, his voice full of warmth and understanding. "It's okay to take it one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it slow, and we'll figure it out together. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be you." The sincerity in his words seemed to reach her, and for the first time, Rebecca allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future that wasn't defined by her past. She smiled softly, the weight on her shoulders seeming to lift, even if just for a moment. "I'm not used to this," she admitted, her voice soft and vulnerable. "But I think I'm ready to try." Michael's heart swelled with emotion as he saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be setbacks, moments of doubt, but he was willing to walk this path with her, no matter where it led. "We'll take it one day at a time," Michael said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you, Rebecca." The room seemed to grow quieter, the tension that had been hanging in the air dissipating as Rebecca took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in a long while. For the first time in months, Michael felt a sense of peace, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they could both heal. He had come to know Rebecca as a strong, resilient woman, but now, he was beginning to see her as someone who had been through more than he could have imagined. A woman who deserved a chance to start over, to find happiness again. As the evening wore on, Michael and Rebecca continued to talk, their conversation flowing more easily now. They spoke about her past, about the things she had been through, and Michael listened with an open heart, offering support without judgment. It was the first real conversation they had ever had, and it felt like a turning point, like they were both finally letting go of the barriers that had kept them apart. As the night drew to a close, Michael stood up, his body aching from sitting for so long. "I think it's time for me to go," he said gently, though he didn't want to leave. But I'll see you tomorrow, right? Rebecca nodded, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. Yes, she said, her voice steady now. Tomorrow. As Michael left her apartment, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he was hopeful. Maybe they both had a chance to rebuild, to start fresh. He didn't know where this journey would take them, but he knew that together, they could face whatever came next. I apologize for the confusion. But the next few days felt different for both Michael and Rebecca. There was a shift, something unspoken that had changed between them after that conversation. Michael, for the first time in what felt like forever, felt like he was walking on solid ground. The weight of the past had been lifted, and although he knew there would be bumps ahead, there was also a glimmer of hope. Rebecca, too, seemed lighter, more at ease in his presence, though Michael could still see the lingering doubt in her eyes. She was hesitant, not entirely sure of the path ahead, but for the first time, she was allowing herself to feel something other than fear. They spent the next few days in a tentative dance, small conversations over coffee, moments of silence that were comfortable rather than awkward. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Michael could tell that Rebecca was trying, and that was all he could ask for. He respected her more than ever for her willingness to open up, even just a little. As the week passed, they began to settle into a new routine. Rebecca continued to care for Lily, of course. But there was something different in the way she interacted with Michael. The walls she had so carefully built up were slowly coming down, and they began to talk more openly, not just about her past but also about their futures. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Michael sat down across from Rebecca in the living room. He had been watching her for the past few days, noting the way she seemed to carry herself with a bit more confidence, as if she was starting to believe in herself again. He had been patient, giving her the space she needed, but now he wanted to take the next step. Rebecca, he began, his voice steady but gentle. I've been thinking a lot about everything we've talked about, and I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. If you're ready to take that next step, I'll be here to help you, but you don't have to do it alone. You've got me and Lily now. Rebecca looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a mix of surprise and vulnerability. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but hearing it out loud felt different. It wasn't just a promise, it was a commitment. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, she admitted quietly, her voice wavering slightly. I've spent so long being independent, keeping my distance, that I don't know how to let someone in, not like this. Michael nodded, understanding her hesitation. I get it, he said softly. You don't have to be ready right away. It's all about taking small steps. And I'll be here, every step of the way, if that's what you want. Rebecca's eyes softened, and for the first time, she truly smiled. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to try. For the first time, I'm willing to let someone in. Michael's heart swelled with emotion, and in that moment, he knew that this was only the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They had both found something in each other that neither had expected. Over the next few weeks, their bond grew stronger. Michael made an effort to show Rebecca that he was there for her, not just as her employer, but as a person who genuinely cared about her well-being. They shared more moments together, both big and small, and for the first time, Rebecca allowed herself to relax, to enjoy the connection they were building. Michael could see the changes in her. She was less guarded, more willing to open up. She still had moments of doubt, but he could tell that she was slowly finding her own sense of peace. Then, one day, something happened that neither of them could have predicted. Rebecca received a letter, and as soon as she read it, Michael saw her face fall. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, holding the letter in her hands. Michael's heart sank, sensing the shift in the air. He approached her cautiously, his voice filled with concern. What's wrong? He asked gently. Rebecca didn't speak at first, her eyes still fixed on the letter. Finally, she looked up at him, her face pale. It's from my past, she said quietly. It's about him. The man I was involved with. He's found me. Michael's stomach churned at the news. The fear in Rebecca's eyes was unmistakable. What does it say? He asked, his voice tight. Rebecca took a deep breath, her hand trembling slightly as she held up the letter. "He wants to meet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He says he wants to make amends, to explain everything." Michael's anger flared at the thought of this man, whoever he was, coming back into Rebecca's life after everything she had been through. He could see how much this letter had shaken her, and he knew they couldn't just ignore it. "We're not going to let him hurt you again," Michael said firmly, his voice full of resolve. "We'll figure this out together. You don't have to face him alone." Rebecca looked at him, the fear in her eyes slowly being replaced by a glimmer of trust. "Thank you," she whispered. And for the first time in a long while, Michael saw the true strength in her. She was no longer the woman running from her past. She was someone who had decided to face it, with him by her side. "I apologize for the confusion, but the days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty." Michael and Rebecca had talked about the letter, and they both knew they couldn't avoid the past forever. The man from Rebecca's past, the one she had tried so hard to escape, was now making his presence known. The fear in Rebecca's eyes haunted Michael, but he didn't show it. He couldn't afford to be weak now. He had made a promise to her, and he was determined to keep it. Together, they would face whatever came next. Rebecca insisted that they wait before making any decisions about meeting the man. "I need time to think," she said quietly one evening as they sat together on the couch. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel, what I'm supposed to do. Part of me wants to forget it all, but another part of me knows I have to confront it. I just don't know how." Michael nodded, understanding the conflict in her heart. He could see how deeply this situation was affecting her. She had spent so long running, so long protecting herself, that now, when the past was knocking at her door, she didn't know how to let it in. He placed his hand over hers, offering her the quiet strength she needed. "You don't have to do this alone, Rebecca," he said softly. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We'll figure this out together. If you want to confront him, I'll be there. If you want to walk away, we'll walk away. It's your choice, and I'll support you no matter what." For a moment, Rebecca didn't speak. She simply looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. Slowly, she nodded, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she whispered. Michael smiled gently, his heart swelling with emotion. "You've already been through so much," he said quietly, "and now it's my turn to be there for you. Whatever happens, we'll get through it." The next few days were a blur of emotions for Rebecca. She had taken the letter with her everywhere, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of it all. The man who had once been a part of her life, the man who had manipulated her and controlled her, now wanted to apologize? It didn't make sense to her. It felt like a trap, like the same cycle of control and deceit she had tried so hard to escape. But there was another part of her, the part she had kept buried, that wondered if he was truly sorry, if he had changed. She couldn't shake the uncertainty. As the days went by, Michael kept his promise. He didn't pressure her, didn't try to convince her one way or the other. He simply let her take the time she needed to process her feelings. One evening, Rebecca finally spoke up. They were sitting in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls, and she looked at Michael with a quiet resolve in her eyes. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "I think I need to face him, once and for all, but only on my terms." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He could see the determination in her eyes, and he knew this was a moment of strength for Rebecca. She was no longer the woman hiding from her past. She was ready to face it head-on, with the courage to stand her ground. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice gentle, but filled with admiration. Rebecca nodded slowly. "Yes. I need to do this for myself. I can't keep running, but I won't let him control me again. I'll decide what happens next." Michael stood up, walking over to her, and gently cupped her face in his hands. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, you've already shown incredible strength, and I'll be right here with you." A tear slipped down Rebecca's cheek, but this time, it wasn't a tear of fear. It was a tear of release, of letting go of the past, of finally allowing herself to heal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I couldn't have done this without you." The next day, Rebecca made the call. She spoke to the man from her past, telling him that she would meet him, but only on her terms. Michael had insisted on being there with her, and Rebecca had agreed. She wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting, but she knew that with Michael by her side, she could handle whatever came her way. The day of the meeting arrived, and as they drove to the location, Rebecca's heart raced. She had no idea what to expect, but she felt a sense of calm knowing that Michael was there, silently supporting her. They arrived at a small, quiet cafe, a place that Rebecca had chosen because it felt neutral, a space where she could control the situation. The man was already waiting when they arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking exactly the same as Rebecca remembered, his dark eyes sharp, his posture rigid. He stood up as they approached, his face unreadable. "Rebecca," he said coolly. "I'm glad you came." Rebecca didn't flinch. She stood tall, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I came because I need to hear the truth. And I need to know if you've really changed, or if this is just another game." Michael stood beside her, his presence a silent but powerful reminder that she wasn't alone. The man's eyes flickered to Michael, but he didn't say anything. Rebecca spoke again, her voice steady. "I'm here to take control of my life. I'm done letting you control me. And I'm done being afraid." I apologize for the confusion, but as Rebecca stood in front of the man from her past, her heart was pounding, yet she felt a sense of calm she hadn't expected. She had come here to take back control of her life, to no longer be a prisoner of her past. Michael stood beside her, a silent pillar of support, and she couldn't help but feel the strength in his presence. The man, seeing her unwavering stance, seemed to hesitate for a moment. He had always been a man who liked to control the situation, but this time, it was different. This time, Rebecca wasn't going to let him. "I know you're angry, Rebecca," the man said, his voice cold, but there was a hint of desperation in it. "I made mistakes, and I'm sorry. I want to make it right. I've changed." Rebecca didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her again. "You can't just erase the past with an apology," she replied, her voice steady and clear. "You hurt me, and you hurt the people I loved. You don't get to just walk in here and pretend like nothing happened." The man's expression faltered, and for a brief moment, Rebecca saw a flash of guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something colder. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his tone hardening. "I just wanted to explain, to tell you that I regret what happened, that I was wrong. You don't understand." "No," Rebecca interrupted, her voice firm. "You don't get to explain. You had your chance, and you ruined it. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it." She took a step back, looking at Michael, who gave her a nod of encouragement. She was doing it. She was finally standing up for herself, no longer the victim, but the survivor. "I'm done letting you control me," she said, her voice strong, filled with finality. The man opened his mouth to say something else, but Rebecca didn't let him. "I'm not interested in hearing anything else. If you really want to make it right, stay out of my life. Stay out of Lily's life. You don't belong here anymore." The man's face twisted with frustration, but Rebecca didn't flinch. She had said what she needed to say. She had taken control of the situation. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. The man stood there, stunned, as Rebecca turned her back on him, walking toward Michael. She could feel his gaze on her, but she didn't look back. She had made her decision, and she was ready to move forward. Michael stepped forward, standing beside her, and without a word, they walked out of the cafe together. As they walked to the car, Rebecca felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't over, not completely, but for the first time, she felt like she had reclaimed her life. She had faced her past, confronted the man who had hurt her, and come out the other side stronger. And as she sat in the car beside Michael, she realized something. She wasn't just healing for herself, she was healing for Lily, for the life they were building together. She wasn't going to let the past hold her back anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Michael glanced at her, his eyes softening. "You did this, Rebecca. You found the strength to face him. You found the strength to take control of your own life. I'm proud of you." Rebecca smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a new beginning. She had started to rebuild her life, to trust again, and to let go of the fear that had held her back for so long. With Michael by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. Together, they had come through the storm, and for the first time in a long time, Rebecca felt hopeful. The future was no longer something to be afraid of. It was something to look forward to. And as Michael drove her home, she realized that it was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with healing, hope, and, most importantly, love.